So to continue on, Theophilus has just described to Autolycus the fact that idols don't necessarily have to be just statues that we worship. They can in fact be characters in a story, characters that you read about and you read their genealogies, just like we do with the Gospels. We pick up the Gospels and we read the genealogies, we read all these things that Jesus supposedly said and did, but unfortunately people have gotten to the point where there are contradictions in the Bible and they will try to iron them out to no end. And I believe that those contradictions are there. So to wake you up to the fact that this is not history, and yet people still continue arguing, oh, well, it's not, because this is God-inspired words, so therefore it's got to be my error. Somehow I'm too stupid to understand what's written on the page. Well, Theophilus said that these things were written by demons when he was talking about the myths. And in that line, he's telling us the same thing that Justin Martyr told us, that these ancient myths were written by devils. And the Christian church has proof of this. And then they offer no proof. They never do. But to remind us of what Justin Martyr said in his first apology and chapter 21, he said, and when we say also that the Word, who was the first birth of God, was produced without sexual union, that he, Jesus Christ, our teacher, was crucified and died and arose again and ascended into heaven, we propound nothing different from what you believe regarding those whom you esteem sons of Jupiter. We propound nothing different than these other mythological characters. And then he goes on to say again, this only be said, that they are written for the advantage and the encouragement of youthful scholars. For all reckon it an honorable thing to imitate the gods. They were written for the advantage and the encouragement of youthful scholars. They're children's stories. They're children's stories. I'd like to show you too, I did a search on Theophilus, and he does not, as I said in the first part, use the word Jesus to mean Jesus the Messiah. You will find the word Jesus used in his text as Jesus, the son of Nun. He's talking about Joshua in the Old Testament, the successor to Moses. He never mentions anyone of the first century called Jesus. He never talks about anywhere in his 3 books of the fact of original sin or our need for a Savior. He doesn't tell us about the apostles. He does not tell us about the birth of Jesus. He does not speak of the Word as becoming incarnate in a human being, in the sense of just being incarnated in one person of Jesus. He does not talk about the crucifixion of Jesus, or his burial, or his resurrection on the 3rd day. Much is said by the Christians about the empty tomb, the empty tomb, the empty tomb. He never mentions anything about a tomb of Jesus. The only tomb that he does mention is for Saturn or for Jupiter, and pointing out that some of these people don't even have tombs. Why? Because they weren't real people. They were children's stories. As I tried to explain on my video of the two gates, the outer story, and beneath that outer story are hidden truths, just like Jesus is said to have taught us by parables. And then he took the disciples aside and explained the parables to them. I'd like to show you what he has to say about the Gospels. In his third book, in the 12th chapter, he does say that the Gospels are inspired by the Spirit of God, and he puts them on par with the prophets. And then in the very next chapter, again, on chastity, he mentions the Gospels again. But it's interesting to note, once again, at a perfect opportunity, if this man knew anything about Jesus at all, he would have had the perfect opportunity to state that Jesus said this, or even that the Lord said this, as he quotes out of the Gospels, but instead he states the voice of the Gospels teaches us still more urgently concerning chastity. Whosoever looketh upon a woman who is not his own wife to lust after her hath committed adultery with her in his heart. Now this, we know, is a quote from Matthew chapter 5. He goes on to say, and he that marrieth says the gospel, not Jesus. He that marrieth says her that is divorced from her husband committeth adultery, and whosoever putteth away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. And then on even into the next chapter of 14 of his third book to Autolycus, again he quotes the gospel. And the gospel says, love your enemies, pray for them that despitefully use you. For if you love them that love you, what reward have you? You see? Perfect opportunity to tell us about our Savior Jesus, and he doesn't. And what's more is that as you get into his books more and more, even the idea of original sin that is so heavily taught by the church, and it is very degrading doctrine to try and tell you that you were born a sinner and you will never be anything without Jesus. That you have to have a mediator between God. Is that so? Adam and Eve, it says, spoke to God. We're told Moses talked to God. But we need a mediator. Well, this is not what he says about our salvation at all. He just simply tells us that God has given us a law and holy commandments to follow. Let me pick this up in a third part.